Chapter 6 Big Brawl in Bedford. Indiana leaned back slightly in the diner booth, lowering his voice. All right, once we're done eating, we'll head to my place. We need somewhere quiet to figure this out. Mid-sentence, he paused. Two men in dark three-piece suits sat a few tables away. Too still, too composed. Not eating, not talking. Watching. Indy tilted his head slightly toward them. You see those two? He muttered to Jimena. I don't think they're here for the milkshakes. Jimena followed his gaze. Who are they? Indy gave a small shrug. No idea. FBI maybe? One of the men stood and approached. KGB, the man said flatly. Stopping beside their table. Let's not waste time pretending otherwise. Indy sighed under his breath. Well, that answers that. The second agent stepped closer, voice cold. Your friend was planning to give you a letter. Jimena blinked, phasing in confusion. What letter? Do I look like a mailwoman to you? We didn't ask, the agent replied. Both of you, come with us. Jimena's expression hardened. In one swift motion, she pulled a switchblade and flicked it open. Or what? Indy groaned quietly. Jimena, I think you just brought a knife. Both agents drew their pistols instantly. To a gunfight. Indy finished. Jimena froze, then slowly lowered the blade and slipped it away. Sorry, hold on. Jimena froze. Oh, wait, hold on. I already read that sentence. Sorry. The first agent gestured toward the door. We won't ask again. Outside. Now. Nobody needs to get hurt. Indy stood, brushing off his jacket, then leaned slightly toward Jimena as they moved. See that guy over there? He whispered. Letterman, football team, big ego. Jimena glanced over. Yeah? Get his attention, Indy murmured, and hit him hard. Jimena didn't hesitate. She hurried over, tapping the broad-shouldered student on the shoulder. Oh my God, look outside, she said urgently. There's an interracial married lesbian couple protesting pro-abortion rights and burning the American flag. The Letterman's eyes went wide. What? Seriously? Let's get them. He didn't finish. Jimena drove her fists straight into his face. He slammed backward onto the table, dishes and drinks being pushed everywhere, being pushed aside. Wait, sorry, I misread that. Dishes and drinks flying everywhere. Sorry, I misread that, sorry. His girlfriend, named Addie, jumped up instantly. That's my boyfriend. Addie lunged, crack, and punched Jimena across the jaw. A letterman nearby stood up and tackled Jimena to the ground. Chairs scraped violently across the floor as more people surged to their feet. Hey, what the hell? Get that greaser! A glass bottle shattered against someone's shoulders. Within seconds, the diner exploded into chaos. Lettermen and greasers collided in a full-scale brawl, fists flying, tables overturning, food and drinks scattering across the floor. Indy grabbed Jimena's arm and yanked her up. Jimena, exit, now! They sprinted toward the door as the fight escalated behind them. A chair crashed into a jukebox. Someone was shouting. Someone else was bleeding. Absolute mayhem. They burst outside into the open air. Motorcycle, Indy barked. Ximena ran straight for it, swinging onto the seat and firing up the engine. Indy jumped on behind her. No, not like that, of course. Not like that. Back on topic. Go! He shouted. Before those agents catch up. She revved the throttle. Behind them, hey, stop right there! One of the KGB agents shouted, bursting out of the diner. Hang on! Jimena yelled, twisting the accelerator. The motorcycle roared to life and shot forward. As they sped off, Indy glanced back. Inside the diner, the fight had only gotten worse. People crashing into tables, shouting, swinging wildly. From inside, Addie's voice echoed, "Get him, Stuart! Kick him in the balls!" Indy grimaced. You know, when I said make a distraction, I didn't mean start a civil war. Ximena smirked. Don't worry. Totally worth it. They tore down the street. Behind them, the KGB agents sprinted to a parked 1953 Buick Century, jumping inside. The engine roared. The chase was on. The Buick sped past the diner, tires screeching as it locked onto the motorcycle ahead. Go, go, go! Indy shouted. Ximena leaned forward, pushing the bike faster Bedford's busy streets. The Buick closed in. Ximena jerked the handlebars left, cutting sharply onto a street, leading towards Marshall College. Hold on, sorry. Okay, sorry, I lost track for a moment. Good, Indy said. Head for the courtyards. They won't be able to follow us in there. The motorcycle surged forward. Ahead, a courtyard gate. A security guard was in the middle of closing it. He looked up and froze. Hey, slow down, he shouted, panicking. You can't come through here. Especially not with a motorcycle. That's dangerous. Someone could get hurt. Hey, slow down. The engine screamed louder. The guard jumped aside at the last possible second. The motorcycle slammed through the partially closed gate. Crash! Metal rattled violently as the gates burst open. Ximena and Indy shot straight into the campus courtyard at full speed. The chase had just escalated. The black Buick Century slammed through the already weakened gates, tearing them off their hinges. The metal twisted violently, one side collapsing flat against the pavement, while the other bent inward like a broken rib. The guard staggered backwards, staring in disbelief as the Buick fishtailed into the courtyard, engine screaming. For a moment, everything froze. The guard blinked. Once. Twice. He slowly looked from the destroyed gates to the disappearing motorcycle to the pursuing car. Nope, he muttered, shaking his head. Nope, that's enough. He turned on his heel and stormed towards his booth. That's it. I'm calling the police. They can figure out whatever in God's name is going on. Inside the booth, his hand fumbled for the phone. Back in the courtyard? Still with us? Ximena shouted over the winds. Barely, Indy replied, gripping the back of the seat. They're not giving up. The Buick tore across the stone path behind them, its suspension rattling violently as it struggled to keep up over uneven ground. Courtyards aren't going to slow them down. Ximena yelled, Then we improvise. Indy shouted back. They shot past clusters of startled students, books dropping, papers scattering on into the ground. What the hell? Move! A professor leapt out of the way just as the motorcycle blasted past him. Ahead, the courtyard opened towards the main campus roads, and beyond it, a crowd. A large one. Ximena narrowed her eyes. That might be a problem. Indy squinted. No, he said slowly. That's an opportunity. They burst out of the courtyard and straight into a full scale anti communist protest. Dozens, maybe hundreds of people filled the streets. There were large signs of anti communist posters and messages. Large posters showed exaggerated caricatures of Chairman of the Council of Ministers and General Secretary of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, or Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev, wild eyes, monstrous features, clutching the globe in greedy hands. American flags waved everywhere. Voices shouted in unison, "Down with communism! Protect American values!" The crowd turned and saw a motorcycle barreling straight towards them. "Look out! Move!" Ximena didn't slow down. "Hold on," she yelled. The motorcycle plunged into the crowd. People scattered in every direction, signs snapping, banners collapsing as she weaved through them at high speed. "Watch it!" he shouted. Behind him, the Buick burst out into the protest, and the chaos doubled. The crowd erupted into panic as the car forced its way through, horns blaring, tires screeching. "Hey, what are you doing? Are you insane?" One protester slammed his sign against the Buick's hood. A driver swerved, narrowly avoiding him. Inside the car, one of the KGB agents muttered in Russian, clearly losing patience. "Where now?" Ximena yelled. Indy scanned ahead. Then he saw it. "Library," he shouted, pointing. "Main library, go!" The towering stone building loomed ahead, and its grand staircase rising above the chaos. Indy didn't hesitate. Wait, no, sorry. Ximena didn't hesitate. She angled the bike straight for it. "You're not serious. Go!" The motorcycle shot up the steps. Thud, thud, thud. The suspension jolted violently as they climbed, stone cracking beneath the tires. Students at the entrance screamed and dove aside. "Hey!" The doors closed. "Brace!" Ximena yelled. Crash. The motorcycle smashed straight through the wooden doors, splintering them inwards. Inside the library, silence. Then, explosion. Wood shards flew across the polished floor as the motorcycle skidded inside, tires screeching against marble. Students froze mid-step. Books dropped. A librarian gasped in horror. "What in the—" Ximena spun the bike sideways, regaining control as they roared deeper into the building. "This is a library," someone shouted. "Not anymore," Indy shot back. They sped past long tables, narrowly missing rows of chairs, weaving between startled students, and towering bookshelves. Behind them, the shattered entrance doors swung loosely. Outside, the Buick screeched to a halt at the base of the steps. The two KGB agents jumped out, weapons ready. They looked up, then froze. In the distance, police sirens, faint at first, then louder, closer. The agents exchanged a glance. One of them cursed under his breath. "Not worth it," the other said sharply. They turned, sprinted back to the car. Within seconds, the Buick roared to life again and sped off down the street, disappearing before the police could arrive. Inside the library, Ximena finally slowed the motorcycle. The engine echoed through the massive hall before she killed it. Silence remained, heavy, stunned. Every eye in the building was on them. Indy slowly looked around, then exhaled. "Well," he said calmly, adjusting his jacket, "I think we lost them." Ximena grinned. "Told you." A librarian marched forward, furious. "You two, have you completely lost your minds?" Indy gave a polite nod. "Ma'am," he said, "with all due respect, this was the quietest possible option." Chapter 7. Oxley's Second Letter. Shattered wood from the doors still littered the marble floor. Students stood frozen in clusters, whispering in disbelief. A few were already gathering their things, eager to leave before whatever just happened became officially their problem. Indiana swung one leg over the motorcycle and stepped off, adjusting as his jacket as if he had simply walked into class 5 minutes late. All right, he muttered to Jimena. We need to move before this turns into paperwork. Jimena nodded, still seated on the bike. Agreed. Before they could leave, Professor Jones, Indy paused. A student hurried toward him, weaving through the scattered desks and overturned chairs. He looked shaken but determined. Derek, right? Indy said, recognizing him. The student nodded quickly. Yeah, sorry. I know this is probably not the best time, but I had a question. And he blinked once, then gave a faint, tired smile. Of course you do. Derek hesitated, glancing briefly at the broken doors behind them. My class just finished Ancient Egypt, and before that, we did Ancient Mesopotamia. Sumerian city-states, Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Neo-Babylonians, all that. He shifted his backpack nervously. I was wondering, when we move into ancient Greece, like where do humanism and individualism actually starts? And how is Greece really different from Egypt and Mesopotamia? Indy exhaled through his nose. Even now, a lecture. All right, he said, gesturing slightly. Quick version. Ximena leaned forward on the handlebars, listening. Indy began pacing lightly as he spoke. Ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, those civilizations are built around order, stability. The individual doesn't matter much compared to the system. He raised a figure. In Egypt, everything revolves around divine kingship. The pharaoh isn't just a ruler, he's a god. Society exists to maintain cosmic balance. Ma'at. Your role in life is assigned, and you fulfill it. Derek nodded. Mesopotamia is similar. Indy continued. Not identical, but close. You've got powerful kings, rigid hierarchies, and gods who control everything. Humans exist to serve them. Law, like Hammurabi's code, is about maintaining structure, not celebrating individuality. He paused briefly. Now, Greece, especially starting around the Archaic period and really developing in the Classical period, changes that. Derek leaned in. How so? Indy smirked slightly. Greeks start asking questions. He pointed towards Derek. Who am I? What is virtue? What is the best way to live? He gestured outward, as if addressing an invisible classroom. You get thinkers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Instead of just obeying tradition, they analyze it, challenge it, debate it. Humanism starts showing up there? Derek asked. Exactly. Indy replied. Not humanism like the European Renaissance, but the early foundation of it. The idea that human reason, and human experience, those matter. He continued, more quickly now. Individualism grows too, especially in city-states like Athens. Citizens participate in politics. They argue in assemblies. Your voice, your argument, has weight. He shrugged. Compare that to Egypt, where questioning authority could actually get you killed, or Mesopotamia, where the system is already set in stone. Literally. Derek let out a quiet. Oh, sorry. Derek let out a quiet. Wow. So Greece is more flexible? More dynamic. Indy corrected. More argumentative. Less about maintaining order. More more about defining it. Derek nodded. Slowly, clearly satisfied. Thanks, Professor. I didn't expect the. He gestured vaguely at the wrecked entrance. This kind of office hours. Indy gave a dry smile. You get used to it. Ximena leaned over slightly. We really should go, she said under her breath. Indy nodded. Right. He turned back to Derek. Keep asking questions, Indy said. That's the whole point. Derek grinned. Will do. Indy swung back onto the motorcycle behind Ximena. Now, he said, gripping the seat, let's try this again, without destroying another building. No promises, Ximena replied. The engine roared to life, students instinctively stepping back this time. Hold on, she said. The motorcycle shot forward, weaving through the library interior before angling toward a side exit, one that was, thankfully, still intact. They burst out into the warm March campus air once more. Behind them, the distant wail of police sirens grew louder. Ahead, open roads. Indy leaned closer, voice low. My place, he said. We translate that letter and figure out what Oxley got himself into. Ximena nodded, eyes focused. The motorcycle accelerated, and they disappeared down the street. 50 minutes later, still March 26, 1957, mid-afternoon. Indy's house was still, not silent, never truly silent, but contained, the kind of place where history pressed in from every direction. Shelves sagged under the weight of books and artifacts, maps overlaid one across the walls, some ancient, some modern, all marked with careful notes and red lines. The front door shut behind them with a firm click. Indy didn't waste time. Let's see what Oxley thought was worth getting captured over, he said, already moving to his desk. Ximena pulled the letter from her jacket and handed it to him. The moment it unfolded, the room seemed to tighten. The paper wasn't just filled. It was overwhelmed. Ink covered nearly every inch. Words layered over every. Oh, wait, sorry. Words layered over other words. Symbols scratched into margins. Entire sections written sideways, upside down, or wedges into spaces that didn't exist. At first glance, it wasn't readable. It was chaotic. That's not a letter, Ximena muttered. That's a full-on breakdown. The Indian didn't respond. His eyes had locked onto the top of the page. A drawing, a skull, but wrong. It was elongated, far beyond anything human. The cranium stretched backwards in a smooth, unnatural slope, almost as if it had been pulled or shaped deliberately. There were no clear sutures, no natural divisions. It lacked the subtle irregularities of a real skull. Indy leaned in slightly, narrowing his eyes. That's not the Michael Hidges. No, wait, hold on. Not Michael, sorry. That's not the Michelle Hidges crystal skull. Not Michael. Michelle. Sorry, guys. Back on topic. That one's stylized, but still human. Same proportions, same structure. He tapped the drawn skull. This isn't stylized. This is something else. His finger traced the long backwards curve. Look at that slope. No oh god, how do you say that? Occipital. I don't know how you say that. I don't know how on earth do you say that. Definition. No natural curvature. It's too smooth. Too intentional. Shimena folded her arms. So, what are you saying, Dr. Jones? Annie didn't look away. I'm saying Oxley didn't think this was human. Silence lingered for a moment before Indy forced himself to move on. He shifted his focus across the page. Drawings, dozens of them. Roman triumphal arches, sketched quickly but accurately. Stepped pyramids, ziggurat-like, but sharper. More angular, not quite Mesopotamian. Jagged mountain ranges drawn in heavy, aggressive strokes. Coastlines, tropical, fractured, uneven, lined with broken shapes that looked like wreckage. Ships, large ones, multi-masted, towering holes, some intact, others split apart, half submerged, tilted at impossible angles. And near the center, a rough map, covered in symbols that resembled Chinese characters, but distorted, simplified, sometimes merged with other marks. Off to the side, a detailed sketch of the Potala Palace. Ximena leaned closer. That's a representation of where he found the skull before getting captured. Tibet. Indy nodded, absently, still scanning. Then his eyes shifted to the text. He exhaled softly. Oh, Ox. What? Ximena asked. Indy rubbed his temple. He didn't write this in one language. He angled the paper slightly and began reading, aloud, voice steady but measured. Yeah, I don't know how to read Hebrew, sorry. Classical Hebrew in a great winds. His fingers moved, and the heavens were torn. He shifted again. Now classical Aramaic here. Waters rising, breaking. He paused, then continued, translating as he went. Coined Greek, not modern Greek. It says, not destruction, not displacement. Another line, Latin. Oh god, I think I'm gonna butcher this. Non perditum sed mutatum. Not destroyed, but changed. Ximena stared. He's switching languages mid-sentence? Yeah, Indy muttered. And doing it on purpose. He continued, faster now, more focused. Chinese annotations, rough but legible. References to fleet structure. He shifted again. Nahuatl phrasing. Fragmented. Mayan influence in the glyphs basin. Ximena blinked. You can actually read that? Indy gave a faint shrug. Close enough. He studied the paper and began reading more clearly now, translated as he spoke. A storm beyond expectation, sky broken, waters violent beyond reason. He moved down the page. Fleet scattered, not lost to the sea, grounded. His finger stopped. Along the northern coast, Sumatra. Ximena's expression sharpened. Indonesia. Indy nodded. He kept reading. Ships of the Admiral, broken, some remain. A graveyard along the coast. He tapped a drawing of the shattered vessels. Jong-He. Ximena exhaled quietly. The treasure fleet. Indy continued, voice low but steady. We did not find India. We found something else. He slowed slightly. A path revealed by storm, not meant for people. The room felt colder. He moved to another section. Map not mine. Map of the Admiral. Preserved. Hidden. India looked up briefly. This isn't Oxley's discovery. He tapped the page. It's Young He's. Ximena shook her head slightly. You're telling me a Ming Dynasty admiral had a map too? Wait, Indy said, raising a hand. He wasn't done. He read the next lines carefully. Ships broken against the lands. Knowledge remains where wood has failed. He traced the rough coastline on the map. Follow the graveyards. The path continues. Ximena leaned closer. Where? And he didn't answer yet. He shifted to the final cluster of text. Denser, more frantic. The writing changed here. Less controlled, more urgent. He read slower. Object recovered. Not artifact. Not of known origin. His eyes flicked back to the skull. It is a key. Ximena's voice dropped. The crystal skull. Indy nodded faintly and kept reading. Nima understands. Connection between object and place. He paused briefly. She must not let it fall into their hands. Ximena's jaw tightened. The Soviets. Indy didn't comment. He finished the page. The city beneath the water. Hold on. He finished the passage. The city beneath the water. Not myth. Not allegory. Real. Waiting. The lost civilization not from this world that inspired Plato. He lowered the page slightly. Silence filled the room. Say it. Ximena said quietly. Indy hesitated for just a moment. Then, Zealandia. Neither of them moved. Indy folded the letter slowly, carefully, as if it might fall apart if handled wrong. Then he spoke. Clear now. Organized. Oxley finds the skull, he said. Not like the others. Different. Not human. He held up a finger. He connects it to something older. Something hidden. Another finger. He traces that to Tibet. And that's where he was taken. Another. Your mother was involved. She understood what he found. Another. Zheng He's fleet got caught up in a massive monsoon near Sumatra. Some of the more unluckier ships got wrecked, washed ashore along the northern coastline. One of those ships carried a map. He tapped the folded letter, and that map leads somewhere beyond anything we've documented. Ximena finished it, quietly. Zealandia. Indy didn't correct her this time. He looked at the letter, then at the skull, then on the map, or whatever the Greeks called Atlantis. He said. He slid the letter onto the desk, and whatever this is, his voice hardened slightly. We're not the only ones looking for it. Chapter 8. Crystal Skull. The room hadn't moved, but everything in it had changed. The letter had sat on Indy's desk, folded with care, as if it might collapse under his own weight if handled any further. The air felt heavier now, more defined. What had started as fragments, drawings, languages, symbols, had settled into something real, something dangerous. Ximena stood across from him, quieter than before. There is one more thing, she said, as Indy looked up. My mother's letter. She reached into her jacket again, this time pulling out a second envelope. Older, cleaner, much less chaotic than Oxley's. The handwriting on it was steady, controlled, very different from the madness they had just decoded. She handed it to him. Indy opened it carefully. He read aloud. Dear Ximena, if you're reading this, then things have gone worse than I had hoped. I don't have the time to explain everything in full. So I need you to trust me and follow these instructions carefully. He paused briefly, then continued. Ox has gotten himself into a situation far more serious than he understands. I fear he won't get out of it without help, specifically from someone we both know. Indy's eyes narrowed slightly as he read the next line. He goes by Indiana Jones, though his real name is Dr. Henry Jones. He's currently a professor of pre-Columbian and Mesoamerican archaeology at Marshall College in Bedford. Ximena gave a faint, almost ironic smile. Well, she got that part right. Indy ignored and kept reading. You must find him. Give him the enclosed page Ox wrote, just before he was taken. He'll understand things in that letter that most people wouldn't. Indy's voice lowered slightly. Ox made discoveries about the skull, important ones, but those discoveries have taken a toll on him. When I saw him, he wasn't himself. He sounded fragmented, like his mind was being pulled in too many directions at once. Ximena's expression tightened. Indy continued. His captors are pursuing him. They've made it clear that if he doesn't tell them where the skull is or what it leads to, they'll threaten to execute him. The room went quiet again. You need to explain everything to Dr. Jones. He needs to come here as soon as possible. I truly believe this is a matter of life and death. Indy slowed at the final line. I trust you. I know you'll do what needs to be done. With all my love, Mom. He lowered the letter. Neither of them spoke for a moment. She knew, Ximena said quietly. Indy nodded. She knew this wasn't just another dig. Ximena crossed her arms, pacing slightly now. She didn't even try to explain it. No, not really. Just pointed everything at you. That's because she didn't need to, Indy replied. She knew I'd recognize the signs. He tapped the folded, coded letter from Oxley. And she was right. Ximena exhaled slowly. There was another letter, she said. Before all of this, Indy looked up. From Oxley? She nodded. Earlier this year, Tibet. Indy gestured slightly. Go on. Ximena leaned back against the edge of the desk, recalling it. He said he found something, a crystal skull, but not like anything documented. He called it legendary. Indy's gaze flickered briefly towards the sketch on the letter. That tracks, he also said. Ximena continued that he was going to return it to its place of origin. She paused. Zealandia. Indy's jaw tightened slightly. So, he already knew. Yeah, Ximena said. And that's what worried my mom. She shook her head. The way he wrote, it didn't sound like a discovery. It sounded like certainty, like he believed it. Indy leaned back, slightly, thinking. That's when she went to bed. Ximena nodded. She thought he lost it, that he was chasing something that didn't exist. A beat. But when she got there, Indy finished. She found out it did. Ximena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she found him. She said quietly. And then the Soviets found both of them. The weight of that settled hard. Indy crossed his arms, and Oxley writes the second letter after that, right before he was taken. Ximena said, and he enclosed it. Indy added, which means he knew what they were watching. Ximena nodded. He didn't give it directly to my mom. He passed it to her, knowing she'd get it out. And they let her go, Indy said. Just long enough, Ximena replied. They both understand what that meant. She hadn't escaped. She'd been allowed to leave. Indy exhaled slowly. They wanted the message to move. Ximena looked at him. So they could follow it. Ximena nodded once. Exactly. Silence. Then Ximena glanced back at the letters on the desk. So where does that leave us? Indy didn't hesitate this time. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the desk beside the folded pages. Two letters, he said. Two timelines. He raised a finger. First, Oxley finds the skull in Tibet, realizes it connects to something bigger, Zealandia. Second finger. Nima goes after him, confirms it's real. Third, Soviets move in, captures both of them. Captures both of them. Third, third, Oxley writes the second letter. Encoded, before they can break him. He looked at her. And now, it's here. Ximena nodded slowly. And they're still looking for it. Indy's expression hardened. Yeah, he glanced once more at the skull drawn, then at the map, then at the two letters. And we're running out of time. Ximena pushed herself off the desk. So, what's the move? Indy turned toward the wall, toward the map of the world, his eyes locked onto Southeast Asia, northern Sumatra. The graveyard, he said. Ximena followed his gaze. Indonesia, Indy nodded. That's where the trail starts. He grabbed his jacket. We're done sitting around. Ximena smirked slightly, already moving toward the door. Good, she said, because I don't think Bedford can survive another day like this. Indy allowed himself the faintest hint of a smile. Let's not test that theory. The two of them stepped out into the late afternoon light, and toward whatever was waiting beyond it. Indiana told Ximena, tomorrow we're going to Sumatra, Medan specifically. We'll head towards the northern tip of the island. We'll follow the coordinates that Mr. Oxley gave us, and we'll be finding the graveyard. From there, we'll be able to rescue your mother, Oxley, and the crystal skull of Zealandia itself. I'm sorry. Chapter 9. Michelle Hedges. Over Honolulu, Hawaii. March 27th, 1957. Mid-afternoon. The airplane's first-class interior resembled a luxurious, spacious hotel lounge or Pullman train car rather than a modern aircraft cabin. It featured wide, plush reclining armchairs with massive legroom, and some long-haul flights even offered private sleeping berths with mattresses and curtains. The cabin featured elegant styling, with soft reading, lights, large windows, and a generally quiet, exclusive atmosphere, often featuring wood paneling or high-quality textiles. Stewardesses provided personalized service, and there were no overhead bins. Passengers relaxed in a lounge-like setting that was more akin to a ballroom, with plenty of room to walk around. Fine dining was a staple, with meals prepared and served in a way that is rarely seen in modern commercial travel. Lol. Seats were arranged for maximum comfort, allowing passengers to stretch out, and they reclined heavily, sometimes even converted into full sleeping berths. Indiana Jones and Ximena Moctezuma were both on board the plane's first-class area. Indy was now wearing his iconic outfit in the plane, the same utilitarian, rugged ensemble designed for adventure, consisting of a brown leather bomber jacket, khaki business shirt, brown trousers, and a fedora. Wow, I still can't believe we're flying with Pan American Airways, she said, lowering her voice slightly, but unable to hide her enthusiasm. The main U.S. international carrier, pioneers of long distance air travel, luxury service, the whole Clipper reputation. She shook her head with a small grin. You're the best, Dr. Jones. Seriously, you are. And he gave a faint, almost amused smile without looking away from the window. Thank you, he said calmly. I appreciate the kindness. For a moment, the two sat in silence. The steady hum of the engines fell into space between them. Then Ximena turned slightly toward him again. By the way, I've been meaning to ask you something. And he glanced over. When we were back at your place, you mentioned Michelle Hedges. When you were talking about the crystal skull, she tilted her head. What exactly are crystal skulls? And what makes this one different? Indy exhaled quietly, shifting slightly in his seat before answering. Crystal skulls, sometimes called rock crystal skulls, are carved objects made from quartz, he began. Clear quartz, milky quartz, sometimes other variations. They're shaped to resemble human skulls, often with a surprising level of detail. He paused briefly. They've been claimed by the people who found them to be pre-Columbian Mesoamerican artifacts, supposedly tied to civilizations like the Aztecs or the Mayans of Mesoamerica. Ximena leaned in slightly. Supposedly? Andy nodded. Yeah, supposedly. He rested one arm against the seat. Scientific analysis has already been done on every major example we have access to, and the results are consistent. He glanced at her. They're not ancient. Ximena blinked. At all? Not even close. Indy replied. Most of them were made in the mid to late 19th century, some possibly even later. He continued. More matter of fact now. The craftsmanship techniques used, the tool marks, the polishing methods don't match any from pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, but they do match European lapidary techniques from that period. Ximena frowned slightly. So, where were they actually made? Germany, most likely. There was a town, Ida Oberstein. Oh wait, sorry. Let me say that again. Ida Ober. Oh shit, sorry. Ida Oberstein. Oh shit, one last time. Oh sorry. Ida Ida Oberstein. It became a major large center for stone carving in the 1800s. They specialized in working imported quartz, especially from Brazil. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. He gave a small shrug. Mass production, for lack of a better term. Decorative objects. Exotic artifacts for collectors. Ximena leaned back slightly. So they're fake? Historically speaking, Indy said. Yeah. He paused, then added. And as for all the stories about mystical powers, ancient knowledge, supernatural origins, he shook his stories about mystical powers. Well, he shook his head. None of that shows up in actual Mesoamerican mythology, not in Aztec traditions, not in Mayan records, not in any verified indigenous accounts. Ximena crossed her arms, thinking, so where did all that come from? Late 19th century demands, Indy replied. People wanted artifacts, real or not, and there was a market for anything that felt ancient, mysterious, and powerful. He continued, by the 1880s, the problem had gotten so It's gotten bad enough that a Smithsonian archaeologist named William Henry Holmes wrote an entire paper about it. Betrayed in spurious Mexican antiquities. Jimena raised an eyebrow. That bad? Bad enough that museums were already buying them, Indy said. Collectors too. He shifted slightly. There was also a French dealer, Eugene Bobin. He was heavily involved in distributing crystal skulls during that time. Sold several pieces that ended up in major museum collections. Jimena nodded slowly. And Michel Hedges? Indy's expression it changed slightly. Not skeptical, but more focused. That one's the most famous, he said. It was allegedly discovered in the 1920s by Anna Mitchell Hedges, the adopted daughter of British adventurer F. A. Mitchell Hedges. He glanced briefly towards the window before continuing. According to the story, he found it in a ruined city in Central America, a perfect crystal skull, supposedly ancient. He paused. Problem is, there's no evidence that it was actually ever found there. Ximena narrowed her eyes slightly. So it's fake too? Indy shrugged lightly. Most likely. Same as the others. He leaned back into his seat. But here's the thing. His tone shifted. Subtle, but noticeable. The one Oxley drew? He glanced at her. That one doesn't match any of them. Ximena's expression tightened. Yeah, I figured. Indy nodded slightly. The Mitchell Hedges skull and the others, they follow human anatomy. Even when they're stylized, they're still recognizably human. He held her gaze. That one wasn't. Silence settled again between them, heavier this time. A steady hum of the aircraft continued around them as the Pacific stretched endlessly below, and whatever Oxley found, it wasn't part of any known collection. A steady hum of the aircraft filled the space between them again, but this time it didn't feel quiet. It felt loaded. Ximena turned slightly towards Indy, still thinking. So, if all of those crystal skulls are fake, why does the Mitchell Hedges one stand out so much? Indy shifted in his seat, adjusting slightly before answering. Because it's the most convincing, he said. And the most famous. He rested his arm along the window, eyes half on the clouds, half on the past. The Mitchell Hedges skull is carved from a single block of quartz, clear, almost perfectly transparent in parts. Life size, proportional, almost exactly like a human skull. He paused. And it's the only one with a fully detachable lower jaw, cut from the same crystal. Ximena blinked. That sounds insanely precise. It is, Indy said, which is exactly why people believed it. He continued, voice steady, almost lecturing again. It was supposedly discovered in the 1920s by Anna Mitchell Hedges in a Mayan ruin. Oh god, how do you say that? Lubantum, in what's now Belize, buried under a collapsed altar. At least, that's the story. He glanced at her. The problem is, there's no actual record of that discovery. No excavation notes, no mention of it at the time. Ximena frowned. So it just appeared? Pretty much, Indy said. In reality, the evidence points to something else entirely. He leaned back slightly. The skull first shows up in documented history in the 1930s in the hands of an art dealer in London. Then, in 1943, Mitchell Hedges buys it at a Sotheby's auction. Ximena raised an eyebrow. So he didn't find it? No, Indy said flatly. He bought it. The engines droned steadily as he continued. And it's not unique either. There's another skull, almost identical, in the British Museum. Same shape, same proportions. The Michelle Hedges one is basically a more detailed version of that. Jimena leaned back, processing. So even the most famous one is probably just a copy of another fake? Exactly, Indy said. He paused, then added, and scientific studies back that up. Tool marks on these skulls, especially the teeth, match rotary tools and polishing techniques from the 19th century. Not anything ancient. He glanced at her again. They weren't carved for stone tools. They were made with modern equipment. For that time, Ximena let out a slow breath. And the whole mythology? The powers? The ritual? Indy shook his head. Mostly invented later. Stories built around them. Atlantis. Ancient knowledge. Mystical energy. None of that shows up in real Mesoamerican records. He shifted slightly. Michel Hedges himself even claimed the skull could be used to will death, that it had power. Ximena gave him a look. You don't believe that? And he didn't hesitate. No, a beat. But I do believe people wanted to. That hung in the air for a moment. Then Ximena leaned forward slightly. So what makes Oxley's skull different isn't just that it looks weird, and he nodded. It's that it doesn't fit into any of that history. He gestured subtly, as if laying out the argument again. Every known crystal skull, European origin, 19th century, designed to look ancient. He tapped the armrest lightly. Oxley's sketch? He looked at her. It doesn't resemble a human skull. It doesn't resemble known fangs. And it's tied to a map that predates all of them. Ximena's expression sharpened. So either Oxley found the one real one, or he found something entirely different. Indy said. The plane shifted slightly as it continued westwards. The clouds below stretched endlessly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ximena broke it, and the map for it is sitting somewhere in Sumatra, or already in someone else's hands. Indy said. She glanced at him. The Soviets. Indy nodded once. They don't need to understand it, he said. They just need to find it before we do. Ximena leaned back again, arms crossed. So what's our advantage? Indy didn't answer immediately. Then, they're chasing a rumor, he said. We're following a trail. He looked at her directly now. We have Oxley's translation. We need to get Zheng He's map. And we know where the wrecks are. He paused. That's more than they've got. Ximena gave a faint smirk. Good, because I don't like being second. Indy almost smiled. The engines continued their steady hum. Time passed, slowly, steadily, carrying them closer to something neither of them could fully define. Indy adjusted his jacket slightly, settling back into the seats. Get your head right while you can, he said. Ximena raised an eyebrow. That's supposed to be reassuring? No, Indy replied calmly. It's supposed to sound honest. He glanced out the window one last time. Because once we hit Sumatra, a brief pause. We don't get the luxury of figuring things out as we go. Ximena didn't look away from him. So, we lock in? Indy nodded. Exactly. Chapter 10. The Ship Graveyard. Sumatra. March 29th, 1957. Midnight. Northern Sumatra at midnight did not feel empty. It felt watchful. The coastline stretched beneath a sky burdened by thick, broken clouds that drifted slowly over the moon, sometimes swallowing its lights entirely, and sometimes allowing enough of it through to wash the sea in a pale, metallic glow. The air was warm and wet, heavy with salt and the deep organic scent of soaked earth, rotten driftwoods, and tropical vegetation not far inland. Every few moments, a breeze came in off the water and pressed against the sky like a damp cloth, carrying with it the hiss of surf against stone and the distant cry of something living deeper in the night. The beach itself was no smooth crescent of sand. It was rough, narrow, and uneven, stitched together by dark rock, tide-cut shelves, and fields of pebbled stone that shifted underfoot. Closer to the waterline, the ground became more treacherous, more broken. Jagged black outcroppings jutted upwards at odd angles like shattered teeth, and the incoming water foamed white as it smashed itself against them. Seaweeds clung to the lower stones in slick, glistening masses, and every surface seemed coated in a faint sheen of moisture that caught the moonlight and made the whole coastline gleam faintly as if it had risen from the sea. Indiana Jones and Jimena Moctezuma moved carefully through it, their fingers small against the sprawling darkness of the coast. They were carrying just enough excavation gear to matter, and not enough to slow them down completely. Canvas, satchels, hand tools, coiled rope, compact lanterns, canteens, and a few wrapped bundles strapped tight for easier transport. Indy had his fedora low on his head, his leather jacket darkened in places by the damp air. Jimena kept close beside him, a flashlight in one hand and a folded copy of Oxley's Coordinates in the other, though by now they both knew the numbers nearly by heart. For the better part of an hour, they had followed the coastline northwards, checking the shoreline, the topography against the fragments in Oxley's map. Each time the clouds thinned and moonlight spilled over the coast, the land seemed to reassemble itself into a different shape. Cliffs looked like ruins. Fallen trees looked like corpses. Jagged rock faces became walls, and walls became shadows again. Then the coastline bent sharply east, and the shadows stopped lying. At first, Ximena thought they were cliffs. Huge dark masses rose above the stone shelf ahead, angular and silent, too regular in some places and too broken in others. Then the clouds shifted overhead, and a band of moonlight cut through the bay. Wood splintered, hulls, masts, the skeletal remains of enormous ships. Jimena slowed to a stop. "Oh my God," Indy said. Nothing for a moment. He just stared. Four great treasure ships lie stranded along the northern coastline, each one in a different state of ruin, each one resting at a grotesque angle where the sea and stone had finally agreed to stop fighting over it. Their hulls, their hulls were black, with age swollen with centuries of water, salt, yet still immense. Wait, hold on, guys. Wait, hold on. Sorry. Their hulls were black with age, swollen with centuries of water and salt, yet still immense. One lay canted, Hard to starboard, its side stove in and its lower timbers crushed against the bed of rock that had split the ship open from below. Another had run farther inland, where its bow had buried itself against a rise of stone and coral, while the rear half twisted slightly off axis, as though the ship had tried to turn long after it was already dead. The third was the smallest and most broken, little more than a gutted frame leaning into the surf, its ribs exposed where the planking had been stripped away by time, tide, and monsoon violence. And behind all of them, looming over the wreckage like the corpse of some ancient sea beast, stood the largest vessel of the four. Its stern rose the highest. Its beam was broader. Its deck structures, though battered and half collapsed, were still more intact than the others. The towering remains of its stern castle stood above the jagged coastline in crooked silhouettes, and the snapped base of what had once been its central mass still jutted upwards from the deck like a broken spear. Tattered lengths of darkened rope hung from beams overhead, steering faintly in the wind. Portions of carved railing still clung stubbornly to the upper deck, their lacquer long gone, their wood swollen and warped, but their workmanship unmistakable even now. Ximena let out a slow breath and turned in a circle, taking them all in. A monsoon did this? She said quietly. One storm, maybe a chain of them, but it had to be catastrophic. Her voice carried oddly in the night, swallowed and returned in fragments by the sea and rock. She stepped forward a few paces, eyes fixed on the largest wreck. These weren't small vessels, Indy. These were giants, even wrecked. They're enormous. Whatever hit them must have thrown them clear out of the water and smashed them into the coast like toys. Indy adjusted the strap of his satchel against his shoulder and kept moving. We're not here for the weather report, he said. Ximena glanced at him, almost offended. I'm serious. So am I. He picked his way across a field of slick stone and pointed toward the largest ship. The map is in that one. Ximena followed his hand. The flagship? Indy nodded once. Oxley's notes were clear. A smaller fleet broke off in the storm, got caught up in the storm, washed ashore here. The Admiral's route map, sorry that I stuttered. Route map, as if it survived. Wouldn't be stored in one of the cargo vessels. It'd be in the command ship. Ximena squinted at the silhouette of the wreck against the clouds. And you're sure that's the command ship? It's the biggest hole in the graveyard, Indy replied. Highest stern, broadest beam, most reinforced upper structure. It carried authority, if nothing else. He stepped over a ridge of coral-encrusted rocks, boots grinding against loose stone. If Jung-He had a chart that mattered, that's where they'd keep it. The tide surged hard against the rocks below them, sending white spray upwards. Some of them misted across Ximena's cheek and jacket sleeve. She wiped it away and looked again toward the wrecks. They're in better shape than I expected. Indy gave a dry look over his shoulder. Depends on what part you're looking at. She stared a moment longer. 500 years and they're still here. 500 years and nobody wanted this coastline badly enough to tear them apart. Ximena frowned. Or nobody wanted them. Indy kept walking. Somebody found them. She moved to catch up. Then why are they still here? He glanced toward the dark wall of jungle farther inland, where the tree line thickened into a black, tangled mess. Because this place doesn't exactly invite tourism. That got the faintest smile out of her. The closer they got, the bigger the wrecks became. Distance had reduced them. Proximity corrected the lie. The hull planks to the nearest vessel were taller than either of them. Iron fastenings, black with the corrosion and thick with salt bloom, still held sections of timber together where the force of the wreck had not split them. In places, barnacles and marine growth had fossilized into ridges along the lower hulls, turning the ships into something halfway between vessel and reef. Fragments of deck lattice hung down in strips. A shattered pulley block dangled from a surviving beam. Thick ropes, calcified and fused in places by time and salt, trailed from the sides like dead vines. The rocky beach narrowed as they approached the flagship. Here the coast was sharper, more severe. The tide crashed in through channels between the rocks and retreated with a... Oh, sorry about that, guys. Sorry. Oops, sorry. I don't know why that's there. Sorry. Come on, get out. Thick ropes calcified. Oh, I already read that part. The rocky beach narrowed. I'm just gonna leave it. Okay, one last time. The rocky beach narrowed as they approached the flagship. Here the coast was sharper, more severe. The tide crashed in through channels between the rocks and retreated with a hollow sucking sound, dragging pebbles and broken shells with it. There was almost no sand left at all, only black stone, fractured coral, wet timber fragments, and shallow pools of seawater that reflected the clouds moving overhead. Jimena raised her flagship. Flagship. Wait, hold on. Oh shit, no, sorry. Jimena raised her flashlight, not flagship, sorry. Though she used it sparingly. The beam ran over the side of the flagship and revealed grooves in the wood, weathered carvings, deep seams where the planks had swollen, and grooves in the wood. Weathered carvings, deep seams where the planks had swollen, and then shrunk again through centuries of rain and heat. The lower starboard side had taken catastrophic damage. Several outer planks were split open, exposing darker interior. Climbing directly by hands would be awkward and dangerous. She tilted her head back. Even broken, that thing's ridiculous. It was built across oceans, Indy said. It also looks like it tried to eat an island. He gave a quick half smile. Lost the argument. She stepped nearer the hull and rested her palm briefly against the wood. It was cool, wet, rich with grain that had risen over time, almost soft in some places from decay, and yet stubbornly solid beneath. This whole fleet must have been torn apart. In the dark, she said. Rain hammering down, waves taller than the hulls, wind driving them sideways. Men screaming, trying to hold anchor or cut lines or pray to anything that would listen. Her voice trailed off as she looked at the smashed lower ribs of the ship nearest them. They never had a chance. And he stopped beside her and looked up at the flagship. No, he said. They probably didn't. A long gust came in from the sea and moved towards the broken rigging overhead. Somewhere on one of the wrecks, an old timber shifted with a low groan. The sound was slow and heavy, like something in pain. Jimena looked up sharply. That was reassuring. It's old wood, Indy said. Old ships settle at midnight. The ship graveyard. He shrugged. Still just wood. Right, that's what I'm worried about. They continue toward the flagship until they reach the point. Sorry. Where the rock shelf rose highest beneath it. Here the vessel loomed directly over them, stranded over the surf on a bed of stone and coral that had been ripped into its underside centuries earlier and never let go. The whole side curved upwards, above their heads in the dark damp planking, and the upper deck wall rose another several feet beyond that. A section of railing had collapsed near the stern, but not enough to give them an easy route. Ximena set down part of her gear and craned her neck. So how exactly were you planning on getting up there? And he looked up once at the deck, while once at a surviving section of upper rail, then slipped the coil of whip from his side. Same way I usually do. Ximena watched him pull it free and gave a small exhale. I was hoping that was the answer. He tested the footing first. The rocks here were slick and uneven, some sharp enough to slice leather if stepped on wrong. He found a relatively level section, rolled his shoulder once, and looked up. The clouds shifted again, letting enough moonlight through to silver the top edge of the railing. Once we're up there, he said, you stay close. No wandering deck. The deck may not even hold evenly. Ximena adjusted the strap on her satchel. You say that like I'm the reckless one. He glanced at her. You drove a motorcycle through a library. She opened her mouth, thought about it, then nodded. Fair. Indy drew a breath and snapped the whip upwards. The crack split through the night like gunfire. Alright, we'll stop here for today.